Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of True Crime with Kendall Rae. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me today. I hope you guys are all having a great day. And for those of you who are new to the show, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here, and I hope you consider clicking subscribe so we can stay in touch. You can get notified every time I upload if YouTube works. But anyway, today I am back with another family involved episode. And as you guys know, I love doing these types of episodes. It means a lot to me to be able to hear from families directly, understand cases more in depth. And I'm just so grateful to be able to do it. And, these types of episodes do take a lot longer on the back end, and we start working on them quite a bit in advance. And it takes also a lot of trust to make these episodes happen. I don't, take it lightly that a family would trust me with their story. And I'm very, very grateful today that I have Hope McGlone joining me to tell all of you her sister's story. It's been such a treat for me to be able to connect with Hope McGlone. She is an amazing person and has done so much for her sister. She was only 16 at the time of Brittany's murder. And today we're going to be talking about the murder of Brittany McGlone. This case, you guys, should have been solved years ago. There have been a lot of failures in this case. Many reasons for this family to just be beyond frustrated at this point, including the fact that someone was arrested and then released. That's right. And I'll get more into that later on. But it's just truly heartbreaking how this whole thing is played out and how Brittany's family at the end of the day has just been left with no justice. And right off the bat, I do want to ask everyone to take a moment to go and follow their Facebook page. I'll have it linked below. I know this means a lot to the families that we work with. This is something that I always really want to encourage people to do. If you're on Facebook or social media, to take the moment to go and, show them that support, just so they feel that there's more people behind them, that they're not in this fight alone, because it can get lonely, and just at times you can feel hopeless is what I continually hear from families that we work with is, it just gets draining. And having support from other people, even if it's just a follow or a positive comment, or even just commenting here if you're not on Facebook or social media or whatever, it means a lot to them. Now, I'm really eager to tell you about Brittany's case because, oh my God, it's going to piss you off like it did me. But before we get into it, I do need to thank this week's sponsor, Grammarly, and it's thanks to their support and also support from all of you that today we're able to award Brittany's family with our Hope Grant through the Higher Hope Foundation. I'll be so honest with you guys, when it comes to writing, which has been something I've struggled with my whole life, I really get stuck. It's like I know what I want to say, but I don't know how to make it come across in the best way possible and for it also to make grammatical sense. But once I started using Grammarly, all of that changed. It's an AI writing partner that sounds like you, not AI. And it works where you work, providing high quality suggestions that understand context to ensure that you sound the way that you want to, regardless of who you're talking to. They have a ton of free features such as revising your writing with a single click or suggestions to keep your writing concise, grammar support and conciseness suggestions. But if you want even more than that, upgrading to Grammarly Pro is really the right choice. And there's a couple of things that I really just love about Grammarly. One being the fact that I can have it right on my phone so it can help me with text messages and DMs. But another feature I love is that you can highlight a section of text and a feature will pop up that suggests ways to improve it, such as rephrasing it, shortening it, and even formalizing it. And you can even type in your own prompt if you aren't satisfied with their suggestions. It saves me so much time with just a few clicks. I also really love their setting goals feature, which allows you to set your goals to ensure the suggestions are made in your voice and adjust to the right audience. You can set the formality, the tone, and even your profession. I absolutely love Grammarly Pro, and I think you will too. So sign up and upgrade to Grammarly Pro to level up your productivity. You can use my link for 20% off Pro. That's grammarly.com/Kendall07. All right, huge thank you again to Grammarly for their support. And with that, let's go ahead and get into Brittany's case. So Brittany Danielle McGlone was born on November 9th, 1987, in New Mexico to her parents Patricia and Ron, and she also had one older brother named Ryan. However, she ended up moving and was raised in Winsboro, Texas, where she lived with her mom after her parents got divorced. Now, they actually split up when she was still pretty young, and both of them went on to remarry and have more kids, which meant Brittany ended up with several siblings on both sides of her family. And according to her mom, Brittany was really always the child that she didn't have to worry about. And Patricia said that Brittany was everything that she could have dreamed of, and that her daughter was born an old soul. She always seemed to make the right decisions and wasn't the type to get into trouble. And I also learned that she was pretty reserved. In a room full of people, she may not have been the loudest, but I can tell you that she likely would have been the kindest. And it was really special getting to learn more about her when I spoke to Hope on the phone, because Hope explained to me that Brittany was really one of those people who simply loved life. She loved being outdoors, she was super lighthearted about everything, and was just the kind of person who was accepting and stood up for the people that she loved. So let's go ahead and listen to Hope herself, who knows best, explain more about the type of person that Brittany was.
My name is Hope. Brittany was my sister. She was a very loving, kind of reserved person, but really cared about her family and her siblings. She never seemed to have a bad day. I would talk to her about things that, things that were going on in our family or things that bothered me, and she didn't really have the same reaction that I did. She was just kind of like, it is what it is, and move on from it. She's very independent, loved horses, loved being outside, very goofy, very funny. We had so many inside jokes. We quoted movies all the time. Movies that we watched a billion times over and over and over again. Loved music. That was always a big thing that we shared, was music. We would listen to like Linkin Park in her room, or like the first Eminem album, different rock bands that she liked. She just liked hanging out with her siblings. I think that was an important thing for her, and something that brought her joy.
Now, as for Brittany's life leading up to what happened, we need to jump to 2006. This was the year that she graduated with honors from Winsboro High School, and despite plans to attend nursing school, she decided she wanted to take a year off. So her plan was to continue living at home with her mom, get a job or two, and then in the fall of 2007, she was going to start back up with school again. And in the fall of 2006, that plan was well underway. First, Brittany was working during the day at a discount retail store called Alco. And then in February of 2007, she also started working night shifts at the Lowe's distribution center in Mount Vernon. And it was actually through her manager at Alco that Brittany ended up meeting a boy named Jeff Stogner. Now, Jeff was the manager's son, and he ended up becoming her first boyfriend in November of that year, just after she turned 19. And just being totally real here, Brittany's family was never a fan of his. And the more I talked to them about it, the more I understand why. And her mother, Patricia, straight up just did not like him right from the beginning. She said he acted dirty and like a criminal, and genuinely just couldn't see what her daughter saw in him. And on the other hand, Brittany was someone who had so much zest and passion for life, and really did have the real drive to succeed, even though she was, taking a little bit of time to start back up with school. But she really wanted to do something with her life, and Jeff didn't seem to be that way at all. And as sad as they were to, see her upset, they were quite relieved when they broke up after only 6 months of dating. However, fortunately for them, that didn't last long, because after a few short weeks of being broken up, they ended up getting back together. Now, we don't know much about this time in between them getting back together and her death, but I do know that Brittany more or less kept up with her regular routine, which was working her 2 jobs, spending time with family, and also, of course, spending time with Jeff. And it sounds like Brittany was really a very, routine-oriented person, which very relatable. I'm like that too. And so any changes to her routine were pretty noticeable. And on May 3rd of 2007, her routine did change. And that evening, she had a night shift at the Lowe's distribution center. And normally, she would have worked that shift, come home to shower and nap, and then she would go over to Jeff's house in the afternoon. However, on that day, she told her mom before she went to work that instead of coming home, that day she was just going to go right to Jeff's. And she explained that he had asked her to come right over after work, which actually wasn't something he had done before. And of course, Patricia wasn't thrilled about the idea of this, especially because she really doesn't like Jeff at all. But she knows Brittany, she's going to do what she's going to do. She's an adult. She can't tell her no. So they told each other, I love you. And Brittany got in her truck and left for her shift. And yeah, the plan was for her not to come home after. She was just going to go right to Jeff's. And sadly, it's really, really hard to think about, but this was the last moment that her and her mom or any of her family members would see or hear from her again, because the following day, Brittany was gone. So that brings us to Friday, May 4th, 2007. And to everyone's knowledge, nothing was wrong. And that was until about 2:30 p.m. when Patricia got a call from Jeff. And immediately when she starts talking to Jeff, the hairs on the back of her neck just stood up because he wanted to know if she had heard from Brittany. And she, of course, was under the impression that Brittany was with him. According to Jeff, though, she wasn't answering her phone, which was odd because Brittany always answered her phone. So immediately, Patricia hangs up with him and tried calling Brittany herself, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Then she went ahead and called Jeff back, and his response to her was that Brittany was actually there. And he said that she's here sleeping. She's sleeping hard, was his quote, which, of course, you would think means that he was with her and that she was okay. But Patricia's motherly instincts were kicking in like crazy, and her intuition told her that Brittany wasn't okay. So at 3:45 p.m., a deputy with the Wood County Sheriff's Office responded to a 911 call alerting to the fact that a body had been found. And the call came from Jeff's mom, who, if you remember, was Brittany's manager, the manager at Alco. And she said that her son had found his girlfriend dead in his bed. And you guys, the scene, oh my God. The scene that first responders walked into was nothing short of horrific. There is a People Magazine Investigates episode on this case, which I will touch on a little bit more later. And they have like a reenactment in there. And even that, even though I know it was fake, was so disturbing to look at. There in Jeff's bed was Brittany. She was undressed, lying face up in bed and covered in blood. And there was nothing to question here. I mean, Brittany was 100% murdered, and it was obvious that it was with some kind of blunt force object. The real question, of course, though, was who did this and why? Now, unfortunately, due to several factors and failures on an investigative level and possible corruption, in my opinion, and in the opinions of many others, those questions just still have not been answered. And we'll go deeper into that later on, but at first I want to share with you what is currently known. So as soon as more investigators arrived on the scene, they were quick to make an assessment, and two things in particular really stood out. For starters, there was no sign of forced entry or any indication that anything major was stolen. Therefore, of course, it didn't seem like this was a robbery gone wrong type of case. And they also noticed that Brittany's underwear wasn't there. They found her jeans, her shirt, her socks, and her bra, but no underwear. It almost looked like she had come over straight from work and had taken her clothes off and then just gotten into bed naked. And although you'll hear me explain, Jeff said that she wasn't naked when he left. Now, I need to put a heavy emphasis on Jeff said, because a lot of the information that you're going to hear in this episode is coming from Jeff. That's just what we know about her case, what we have to work with, and I don't really take Jeff as a very reliable source, and most people who are involved with this case don't either. And I know you guys are good critical thinkers and understand that. So yeah, constantly keep that in your mind anytime I say Jeff said XYZ. But anyways, with her underwear being missing, there became a fear that this may have been a sexually motivated crime and that Brittany may have been the victim of a sexual assault. And in my opinion, certainly seems that way. And so, of course, in order to figure that out and also determine her official cause of death, her body was taken to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. And meanwhile, investigators are continuing to search the scene. And one thing they noticed was that someone had recently taken a shower. The bathroom still smelled strongly like soap, specifically shea butter, and there was still water in the drain. So they swabbed it, and along with everything else from the scene, they sent it all off for DNA testing. But one thing they couldn't find, though, was the murder weapon. And based on the markings that were left on Brittany, it's believed that she was killed with, like I said, some type of object, but what that is and where that is still a mystery. A theory from early on in the investigation was that it was a T-shaped object, but there's still nothing to actually confirm this, so just take that with a grain of salt, but it's something to, keep in the back of your mind. Now, of course, while all of these questions are starting to circle and they're evaluating the scene, Brittany's family is getting the worst news of their lives. Patricia said that she was greeted at the door by two officers who told her that her only daughter was gone. And do you want to know what her immediate reaction was? She said, "That son of a bitch killed her, didn't he?" And personally, I think that says a whole lot. And he is not our only suspect, so don't get too locked in on him. I will explain. But yeah, I think that's pretty interesting that that was what crossed her mind immediately, and that she had bad feelings about him from the very start of their relationship. And we'll get more into why she thought that beyond what we've already talked about. But first, I want you to hear from Hope about her experience finding out and what she thought would happen in those first couple of days. And of course, keep in mind that she was 16 at the time.
So it was a Friday. I was a sophomore in high school, and it was close to the semester ending, so I was at my grandparents' house. But I was on the porch eating some hot Cheetos. I remember that. And my younger brother was supposed to be going to the movies with a friend. So when I was sitting outside, my mom drove up, and it was my mom, my stepdad, my brother, and his friend. And my mom kind of just walked in front of me and then was like, "Come inside." And I looked at my brother and I was like, "Are we in trouble?" I couldn't think of anything that we did, to be in trouble, but I perceived it as us being in trouble for some reason. So we went inside and they set us down, and in the beginning, my stepdad, he just told us that there had been an accident and Brittany was dead. And I didn't know. I mean, the first thing I thought was a car accident. But when he said that, I remember just kind of freezing, and then like seeing everyone looking at me and my brother. And then I got up and I ran out the front door to the front yard of my grandma's house and kind of collapsed in the yard, and my grandma went out there and was holding me and my brother in both of her arms. I never remembered who or how I found out what had actually happened to her. My mom informed me that she was the one who told us that she had been murdered and it wasn't an accident, but I can't recall being told that. I went from not knowing that she'd been murdered to being murdered. And the rest of the evening we spent with my family. I remember sitting on the porch and kind of talking about things and what we thought might have happened or who. And I believe Jeff's name had come up just between my family and I talking about things. And I guess I thought that the next day, really the next day, that someone would be arrested. I thought, it was like TV shows and everything happens so quickly on shows and movies. So I thought like any day now, or that someone was going to be arrested. And it just turned out that was never the case until many years later, but that was didn't go the way we thought.
So a big reason that everyone's attention turned to Jeff had to do with a few things. Okay, for starters, he was the last known person to see her alive, and that is always a reason to look at someone, of course. But they also had their sights on him because his and Brittany's relationship had recently experienced a bit of a hiccup. Okay, so when they were broken up for that short period of time, Brittany ended up being intimate with another guy. And it was just, one of those one night kind of things, but in the eyes of many, they wondered if maybe this really upset Jeff and maybe it could have been a motive. Now, to be clear, her family still to this day believes that this is a very valid motive and it's not something that can be ruled out. And Patricia was actually the one to tell deputies about it in the first place because she felt like it was information that they probably should know. So at that point, Jeff was, of course, brought into the station for questioning. And honestly, from the viewpoint of detectives, he did appear to be very upset about what had happened. And they also said that he was very forthcoming with the information that he had. Jeff shared that he and Brittany had been dating for roughly 7 months and that the reason she was at his house that morning was because he had asked her to come. And he specifically said that he wanted her there because he and his stepdad were driving a few hours to Dallas to pick up his grandma that day. So he wanted to spend some time with her before they left. So according to his story, Brittany arrived at his place around 5 a.m. And by that point, he says that he had fallen asleep on the couch while he was waiting for her. So when she did get there, she woke him up and the two of them ended up getting in bed to cuddle. Jeff explained that they fell back asleep, but that he woke up at 7 so that he could shower before he and his stepdad left. And that was right around 9 a.m. Now, in this interview, he swears that she was still in bed alive when he told her he loved her and walked out the door. And he also swears that she went to bed wearing a t-shirt and underwear. And this is where things get interesting because Jeff's story doesn't end here. Apparently, while he and his stepdad were checking the oil on the car just shortly before they left, a guy named Chad Carr showed up, and he was the boyfriend of Jeff's little sister, Velva. Now, I really want to point out here that Velva was still in high school and Chad was in his 20s. So that alone tells you a lot about this guy, right? And according to Jeff, Chad had come over that morning to pick up a check, and then he just ended up sticking around to chat for a bit. And this is important because in Jeff's story, he says that he told Chad that Brittany was asleep inside and that he and his stepdad were headed off to Dallas. Therefore, he gave Chad the knowledge that Brittany was home alone. And then fast forward to 3:30 p.m., this is when he says they returned from Dallas, which is when he went into his room and immediately saw a big puddle of blood. And in a state of shock, he says he ran over to her and was screaming at her to wake up. And if you believe Jeff, again, this is Jeff's story, that means that the window when she was murdered was roughly between 9 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. Again, that's if you believe that she was alive when he left. Now, investigators kept pressing him, of course, and they even asked him about that one night stand that she had to see if that was any kind of trigger for him, if he was angry at her for that. But he said he didn't care. He told them that they had talked it through, and since they were broken up when it happened, it was, just the way it is. He did mention that someone else had stopped by, a guy named Cody. And I guess he had texted him that morning asking if he could drop off some weed and said that he left money for him underneath this garden gnome at the front door. But apparently when he got home, he lifted up the gnome to see that the money was gone, but no weed had been left behind. So now, of course, Chad and Cody are two people that investigators want to take a look at. But the issue, though, is it was going to take a couple of days before a polygraph operator could drive into town. In the meantime, though, the investigation was well underway. The clothing that Jeff was wearing had been taken from him so that they could test it along with other evidence from the scene, and the autopsy, like I said, was in progress. And in fact, the next morning, the results came in, which confirmed Brittany's cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head. And something actually stood out to them about this because it turned out that Brittany was not sexually assaulted. And the reason it stood out so much was because it meant that her murder wasn't sexually motivated, which We also know it wasn't a robbery gone wrong. So that means that whoever killed Brittany did it from a standpoint of hate and intent. And whoever that person was, they had to have known that Brittany was over there alone. So investigators tracked down everyone who was there and brought them in for questioning, starting with Chad. Now, Chad seemed a lot less willing to talk to them and even quite frankly annoyed that he was there. He was described as standoffish, and actually he was willing to answer some questions. And while he did admit to being there that morning, he definitely denied being involved. He even gave a minute-by-minute breakdown of his day and talked about all the errands he ran, from talking to his boss and then going to the doctor and then picking up Velva from school. He even agreed to take a polygraph, but like I mentioned, it was going to be a little bit before someone could come into town to administer one. So they sort of put Chad off to the side for the moment, and then they brought in Cody to see if he had any information. But apparently he didn't actually go over there that day. And just like the others, they had no reason to hold him, so he was let go. They also even brought in Justin, who was that guy that she had slept with just one night before her and Jeff had gotten back together, and he was let go too because he had a rock solid alibi. And so while they're waiting on this polygraph administrator, Brittany's loved ones are just left to mourn her loss with a million more questions than answers. And they're in so much pain, just desperately wanting to understand who could have done this and why. So they ended up laying Brittany to rest 4 days after she was killed. And it was a day filled with unimaginable pain, especially with the shock of it happening so suddenly, and no one could have ever have expected this. Now, they chose to bury her at Lee Cemetery right there in Winsboro, and the only part of this that brings me any peace really is knowing that she is laid in a beautiful shady spot surrounded by horses, which she loved. And I'll be honest, it was also a really pivotal day for another reason, because on top of everything that was going on, Hope says that something happened that day that made her realize that she had a secret that she had been keeping a long time, and at this point it needed to be shared. Hope is still a child at this point, and while she's at her big sister's funeral, she said that their grandpa on their dad's side had put his arm around her and said, "Have you gone to see the body yet?" Not even something normal like, "Have you gone to see her yet?" but specifically the body, which I don't know, maybe I am over exaggerating. That is so fucking weird to me. And I know Hope feels the same. Their family feels the same. It's just the way that was said was really, really weird and distasteful and just yuck. But that's unfortunately not even the worst part, because in that moment, Hope remembered the last conversation that she had with her sister. Take a listen.
So Brittany had come down for my 16th birthday. We had a birthday party that my mom put on. So my sister drove down here, and we were outside of my aunt and uncle's house, me and my cousins and Brittany, and we were sitting outside on the sidewalk in front of, I think we might have been on the car. And I don't know what initiated that conversation or why I can't remember if we were talking about something that related to that. And I don't remember her exact words at this point, but she told me that our granddad, who is my dad's adopted father, so he's not our biological grandfather, but that he had been sexually abusing her, in her words, from when she was young, and at that time she said it had recently stopped. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't ask what he was doing or anything like that. We didn't go into the details, but she asked me to not tell anyone, not say anything about it.
Now, understandably, this is information that she knew she needed to share with family now at this point, so she did. And when Patricia found out, man, it was devastating beyond words. Especially on top of everything that had just happened, this news was like rubbing salt in an already impossibly painful wound. And it turns out that Hope wasn't the only person that Brittany confided in. It wasn't to the same degree, but she did tell her aunt that her grandpa had been following her around town as well as at her job at Alco. She didn't mention the abuse, but in hindsight, this information paired with what Hope knew, and it made them seriously question if he could have been involved. And what made them consider this even more was the fact that he lived across the street from the Stogner house. And so Patricia did what any good mother would do once you find something like this out, and she immediately reported this information to law enforcement. However, detectives say that he was at work from 7 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., which just puts him away from the house during the window of time when her murder occurred. That being said, even though he wasn't responsible for death, he is a total creep and he's a criminal. He's a guilty man, but he passed away in 2009 before any charges could be brought against him, which is very unfortunate. So by this point in time, a lot has happened, right? And they're only 1 week out from Brittany's murder. And finally, at this point, the polygraph administrator had arrived. And everyone was really excited about this, hoping that they would get a little bit closer to the truth, if not expose the truth completely. So starting off with Jeff, the detectives did say that he passed with no problems or signs of deception. And the same goes for Cody. He passed as well. However, Chad, on the other hand, straight up failed it, specifically when he was asked if he had anything to do with her cause of death and if he was responsible for the injuries that she sustained. And when he was told that he failed, this loser was adamant that he couldn't have done it since he had already accounted for his entire day. And of course, polygraph tests are not the end all be all. They certainly don't prove guilt or innocence, and they are not even admissible in court. I mean, anyone who is into true crime or in this industry for work knows this. Okay, so this doesn't prove anything, but hey, it's definitely something to take serious note of, right? And honestly, Chad's whole demeanor just seemed off. So they decided it was best to continue looking into him, of course, and just listen to what they found. It turns out that he had already gone to prison before for assaulting a woman in a similar fashion to how Brittany was murdered. The victim of that assault thankfully survived and pressed charges, hence how they were able to learn about it in the first place. And learning this was especially helpful because it gave detectives probable cause to get a search warrant for his house. And they did end up finding some things. And it's creepy, you guys. This included a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, both with suspected blood on them, as well as a ski mask. And then they also found not one, but 2 pairs of women's underwear. Now, one of these they learned belonged to his girlfriend, Velva, but the other, he couldn't explain where they were from. And they were size 5, which was Brittany's size. So, of course, they send all that off to be tested. And then in the meantime, detectives looked further into his alibi. And it turns out, big shocker, there was a gap in his story that didn't make sense. So initially, Chad had mentioned that he woke up at his mom's house, which is where he lives, and then after that, he drove Velva to school. And from there, he said he ran by his construction job, followed by that brief interaction at Jeff's house. And then he says he went to Alco around 9:20 a.m., which is confirmed by his surveillance footage. And from there, he drove to a doctor's appointment. Here's where things don't line up though, okay? Chad told detectives that he actually arrived to the appointment 15 minutes early, but when they spoke to the receptionist, turns out he actually showed up 20 minutes late. And not only did he just show up late, but he also gave them a heads up. He called them to say that he was having car problems and wouldn't be there on time. So huge red flag. And so rather than arriving at around 9:45 like he claimed, he actually showed up closer to 10:20, which means there is about an hour of time that's completely unaccounted for. And yes, if you're wondering, there would have been enough time to drive from Alco to Jeff's house, commit the crime, and then from Jeff's house to the doctor. So of course detectives are like, what the fuck is going on here? So they call him back into the station for another round of questioning, but shocker, he continues to deny everything. And he even outright tried to say that he didn't even remember being late to the doctor's appointment at all, which, come on, dude, it hadn't been that long at this point. And plus, if it were me, I always get major anxiety about being late anywhere, but I think everyone can agree that you'd probably remember especially if you were that late and you had even made a call talking about how you had car problems and you were going to be late. Like, that would probably stay somewhere in your brain, right? Okay, so they know for a fact that he was late to this appointment, and he's just like, I didn't know. I don't remember that. Come on, dude. But what's interesting though is even when they told him that they thought he was lying and that they were testing items from his house for possible DNA evidence, Chad confidently said that they wouldn't find his DNA on her or in that room. And the thing is, they didn't. When those results came back, Chad's DNA wasn't on it. And not only that, but Brittany's DNA wasn't on anything that they collected from his house, which ultimately meant they couldn't arrest him. I do want to point out, however, that they did find blood tissue in the drain of the shower, which pretty much confirmed that her killer showered. But since there was no DNA, nothing could be done. So weeks and then months started to pass, and the hope that they once had was really starting to fade at that point. And in that time, there was little for law enforcement to go off in terms of an investigation. It became a lot more difficult. That being said, 8 months after Brittany was killed, some new information came to light from Jeff's little sister, Velva. Also, remember, she is also Chad's girlfriend. And also, remember, she wasn't 18 yet. So she went with her mom, and both of them seemed really upset. And apparently Velva and Chad had broken up, thankfully, since everything had happened. And that is when she started to write things down that she remembered, including the fact that when he picked her up from school on the day of the murder, Chad was supposedly acting really nervous. And she even said that she distinctly remembered that she could smell her perfume and soap on him. And that soap was shea butter. And I hope you haven't forgotten yet, detectives first noticed that the recently used shower smelled like shea butter. So apparently Chad admitted to Velva that he had showered. But when she asked him if he had showered at her house, he didn't respond. Don't forget though, Jeff said that he also took a shower that morning. But is it possible that Chad did too? Now, in terms of timeline, detectives do believe that he would have had the time and the knowledge to know that nobody was going to be home in that hour. But when looking at Chad, the big question here is why? What's the motive here? Well, Velva explained that he was super mad that Brittany was allowed to spend the night at their family's house, but he was not. However, Patricia said that Brittany never actually slept over there. And don't forget, she worked overnight shifts quite often. So if this was his motive, it didn't really feel like a very strong one. And truthfully, their family just doesn't put too much weight into this. But regardless of if it was strong or weak, it was a motive for law enforcement to consider nonetheless. And so this was their theory, okay? They believe that when Jeff told Chad that Brittany was asleep inside, he returned to the house after he went to Alco and he killed her. And then after he killed her, he showered and collected the murder weapon, which he somehow disposed of. What sucks though is Velva's information was still not enough to go ahead and make an arrest. So now things, started taking even longer than anyone had expected. And more months and years began to pass with no answers, no justice. It's incredibly frustrating for this family. And during that time, Chad did end up going to prison, but it was unrelated to Brittany's case. In 2012, he was sentenced to 8 years for felony sexual assault. And also during that time, the Stogner household was demolished, which means that any answers or evidence that was there went with it. So of course, there was this period of intense disappointment, anger, and really hopelessness in their family. I mean, they felt failed by the sheriff's department because, truth be told, as time began to pass, nobody seemed to care anymore. Every administration that came into office failed to communicate with them. And the message that they were getting was that Brittany no longer mattered. But Brittany did and still does matter. And honestly, guys, the reason that I am here today telling you her story is ultimately because of hope. And had she not started the advocacy efforts that she did and really, started lighting a fire under Brittany's case, bringing it back into the spotlight as much as she could, it's likely that I never would have even heard of Brittany's case. And I'll let Hope share, but to summarize it, she saw the lack of movement in her sister's case and decided that it was time to take matters into her own hands, which I am really so proud of her for. I mean, after so much time has passed, it's easy to feel hopeless. It's easy to feel defeated and scared, especially to get on the internet. You never know how people are going to react, and it can be hard to get enough people behind you and to really make your voice heard. It can feel defeating, and it can bring up a lot of, as you can imagine, emotions and trauma that come with all of it. But I'm so proud of her for doing that. And one of the things that she did, along with some other family members, is created the Who Killed Brittany McGlone Facebook page. And through that page, they've been able to gain a few thousand followers to help spread awareness.
I started the Facebook page after seeing another unsolved homicide that was near where I live, and it had a pretty big following, and their case had a lot of similarities to ours when it came to law enforcement and the treatment that we received from law enforcement and the terrible job they did in the beginning. So that page inspired me to create my own, because at that time I just felt like things weren't progressing. I couldn't get her case to be covered even by local media or podcasts or anything. So I turned to social media and creating this page to hopefully get more attention to be brought to her case and her story, and hopefully gain some traction, and maybe someone might come forth with information. Social media is a pretty powerful tool, especially for things like this.
And social media really has been a very powerful tool for them. Again, I really want to encourage you to go give them a follow. I know it will mean the world to them. And I also wanted to mention that in October of 2021, a reporter with People magazine stumbled across the case through the Facebook page, actually, and was shocked to find out that nobody was talking about this case. And so she began reporting on it. And Brittany's case received some long overdue attention, including on an episode of People magazine Investigates. And in my opinion, they did a really good job covering the case, but when it comes to a big organization like that and dealing with TV and streaming services, there's only so much finger pointing that they can do, if you know what I mean. So when speaking with Hope, we really wanted to make sure that the truth was exposed as much as we could in a safe way. And that truth is that Brittany has been continuously failed by the people in law enforcement who were supposed to be helping her. When I spoke to Hope, I learned that their efforts to get justice have been nothing but peaceful. I mean, I really can't express this enough, but they have really approached their disappointment. I feel like that doesn't even begin to cover it. Their rage and anger with more grace than more people would in their shoes. I mean, much more than I would. I'll tell you that right now. Like, they have been angels about this situation, which is the best way to go about it, in my opinion. I just think for most people, it'd be very hard to do. And they have been able to, really just stay as professional, calm, cool, and collected as they can in a situation like this. And when I started hearing from Hope the bullshit that she has been through, I felt, oh my God, it's insane, you guys. Okay, so one sheriff literally blocked Hope from emailing him after she sent him an email with just the subject line, "Justice for Brittany McGlone." That's right, just the subject line. All it said was "Justice for Brittany McGlone," and the email itself didn't even have a message, didn't even have a body. And she was blocked by the sheriff, dude. The big picture here is that law enforcement did not handle this investigation with the care it deserved at all. Doesn't seem, in my opinion, I just don't think they give a shit. And her family feels like nothing will ever happen if they don't push for it. And I could not agree with them more. And I'm proud of them for continuing to fight and push, because it can feel so defeating when you're just straight up being blocked like that. I mean, it's one thing when they're just not listening to you and like giving you bullshit responses all the time, but just to be blocked, that is disgusting to me. And there's more of that, so it gets worse. But there is one small caveat to them continuing to push, and that has to do with the current sheriff, Kelly Cole. Okay, so starting in 2021, things started to look slightly more promising because he became the new sheriff, and he actually did take an interest in Brittany's case. And it turns out he was an investigator at the time of her murder, so this case felt somewhat personal to him. Mind you, he's also been the 5th sheriff to take office since her murder, so he was seemingly the first to actually care. And thankfully, I'm happy to say that he agrees with their family that the lack of justice has gone on far too long. It's just unacceptable. So he and his team began going through everything that they had in hopes that a fresh set of eyes would help. And no surprise here, but Chad stood out to them. However, without a smoking gun, arresting him would be a risk, but that was a risk that he was willing to take. And so on August 31st, 2022, an arrest warrant for capital murder was obtained. And the probable cause they used to get that warrant included the holes in his alibi, the failed polygraph test, his knowledge of the victim's whereabouts, his prior conviction of aggravated assault, which was done in a manner similar to Brittany's death, and the fact that he had underwear in her size in his possession when it was noted that a pair of her underwear was missing. And that arrest went down the next day in Dallas, and he was held on a $1 million bond. And you might be thinking, ooh, we're getting somewhere. Are we feeling hopeful? Did something good happen after this? Well, no. Things took a turn for the worse, unfortunately. Once Chad was arrested, the district attorney's office had 90 days to present this case to a grand jury to receive an indictment. But as the days started to pass, so did their confidence that the indictment was even coming. And it wasn't until day 89 that they got their answer. And ultimately, the decision was that a grand jury wouldn't indict. It's actually called a no bill, and it means that they didn't find enough evidence to move forward. And so on November 30th, 2022, Chad was released, a free man. Ugh. God, it's infuriating to think about. And to add insult to injury, you guys, the DA's office didn't even call the family to tell them. The sheriff did, which honestly is very emblematic of the way that they have handled this case. I mean, if the failures from an investigation standpoint weren't enough, the DA's office has completely shut this family out. It is disgusting. Like, let me tell you, I was pissed when I heard this bullshit. So in addition to that one sheriff who blocked her, they also blocked Hope on Facebook to keep her from commenting on their page. And I'm talking about the DA's office, which I have to reiterate here. Her actions have been nothing but peaceful. When I was talking to her on the phone, I was like trying to understand how this could happen, because I have worked with families in the past who have been blocked by DA's offices, but a lot of that, not that it was justified there either. I mean, it never is. You're a public official. What the fuck are you doing? But in those cases, it was like repeated comments and multiple people, like it got not harassing, but like sort of aggressive, which again, let me make it clear, they should not have been blocked either. But I asked Hope, how did you end up getting blocked? What did you say? And all she commented, dude, was #justice for Brittany McGlone, and they blocked her for that. I was floored when she told me this. In my opinion, the DA's office really seems to be the real problem here. And as far as Hope is concerned, Brittany's blood is on their hands, and I couldn't agree more. And I'll let her speak to this as well, but she believes that DA Angela Albers straight up nudged the jury not to indict. That's right. That's what she believes. I have to reiterate, I can't say that for myself, but she believes that for whatever reason, this was purposely mishandled. And this is one of those situations, where because Angela isn't explaining why she won't pursue this case, Hope and everyone else, myself included, is left to wonder why. And you can probably understand how after all these years, it's easy to fill those unanswered questions with speculation of corruption. And of course, if you are a true crime consumer, if you've watched, any number of episodes of this show, you know that corruption in law enforcement and DA's office and the entire justice system is definitely there. At the end of the day, there's just no valid reason why Angela would be refusing to take on this case. unless she knows something that we don't. Either that, or maybe she's just scared to lose. And honestly, either way, at the end of the day, there's a guilty person out walking free in her community. And basically, from what I understand, she's dragging her feet because she's mad at the sheriff for arresting Chad to begin with. And again, infuriating, but she wouldn't even take a meeting with their family when he was arrested. Instead, she set up a meeting with Patricia and the assistant DA, Brandon Bade. And Patricia says that Brandon was the one who made it clear that they were upset with the sheriff for arresting Chad without consulting them first. Which, let me make clear, Sheriff Kelly didn't legally have to do that. Mind you, Brandon represented Chad in 2007 on a sexual assault case, okay? So keep that in mind. So he has a personal interest in this and never should have been involved with Brittany's case to begin with. Then, somewhat more recently, they did end up meeting with Angela, and Hope told me that she hardly spoke and could not have looked less interested in hearing them out. And what makes it even sadder is Angela worked for the DA's office before she became the DA and was working there when Brittany died. So in theory, you would hope, right, that she'd have some motivation and having that connection to the case to see this through to the end, but clearly not. And also, let me share with you that the DA's office claims to fight for victims' rights, yet they don't even have a victim's advocate, okay? So how is any person supposed to feel protected and supported during one of the worst things that someone can go through when there aren't even resources available to help them? Okay, riddle me that. Makes no sense. And I think it's pretty obvious at this point, but angry doesn't even begin to describe the way they feel about how all of this has played out over the years.
So we were communicating with Sheriff Cole. This was in 2022. Chad had pretty recently been released from prison after serving an 8-year sentence on an unrelated sexual assault charge. So we had a little bit of a gathering, a memorial on the 15th anniversary of her murder in front of the sheriff's office. And when we met with him, he kind of voiced to us that something needed to be done. So we were kind of given a little bit of a heads up of what was happening. But I remember getting a text. My dad received a text from Sheriff Cole saying Chad Carr has been arrested for capital murder. And I was shocked. I thought that, I lived every day thinking like the next day would be the day. So for it to finally happen was, I don't think I could even put into words other than being shocked. So of course we posted that and word got around on social media, and I had such an influx of message or comments and all kinds of things on the Facebook page. And then he was in custody in Wood County, and we had been waiting for his case to go to a grand jury to see if it would be indicted. And here in Texas, the district attorney's office has 90 days to proceed with an indictment if someone's in custody, or they either have to be released or have a bond reduction hearing. So we had been waiting, and grand juries had been scheduled, but every time one came up, it would be canceled. So we kept asking Kelly, what's happening? Why does this keep getting pushed off? He didn't know. No one at the district attorney's office communicated with us. So it was actually the 89th day that Chad had been in custody, and the DA finally sent his case to the grand jury, and it was about noon or so, or a little early afternoon, and I was at work and was texting with Brittany's mom and my dad, and Brittany's mom sent me a text and said they no-billed him, which means they did not return an indictment. My first reaction, I remember being at work, and I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. I didn't expect it. I think a little part of me kind of thought something would go wrong, but the majority didn't think that that would happen. I was honestly more shocked about that than him being arrested, and just obviously I was very angry. I didn't understand. I didn't think that this situation could get worse, and it just kept seeming like it was getting worse. And from some of the stuff we've heard from the community and other things that we had discovered in some documents, it was my belief, for whatever reason, the district attorney's office intentionally caused this no bill for Chad to not be indicted. We came across some things that were one of the he is still a current assistant district attorney at Wood County who had previously represented Chad Carr as his defense attorney. So we weren't too sure how that played into things or if that, affected anything. But after the no bill, we tried to get in contact with the district attorney's office. But even before we tried to contact them, we waited to see if anyone would contact us. No one contacted us. Only the sheriff had been communicating with us. So we kept trying to contact them to figure out what happened, just to hear from them. Left messages. No one returned our calls. Kept leaving messages, and just silence from them, which we didn't really understand because their role is to help us and advocate for victims, and we couldn't understand why we were being completely shut off and why they wouldn't want to communicate with us. And I still don't understand it. I still don't understand their reasoning behind anything that they're doing with this case, whether they don't want to take this case to a trial because it's too much for them, it's too big of a case, but they're also not willing to hand it off or let anyone else come in and help either. There's some rift between the sheriff's office and the DA's office, and we know that the sheriff is willing to work and communicate with them, and they don't seem to be willing to do that either. So I don't understand what their issue is specifically with Brittany's case.
Now, of course, when it comes to who is actually guilty, who actually murdered Brittany, it's a loaded question, right? For a long time, the belief was that Chad was involved, and of course that hasn't changed. And I'm sure by this point in the episode, a lot of you are leaning in that direction, which totally makes sense. But I did want to share that more recently, the sheriff has started to discuss the possibility that 2 people are responsible. And I think it goes without saying that Jeff is a pretty reasonable person to doubt, right? Like I said earlier, the only real proof we have that she was even alive when he left came from Jeff himself. His stepdad did claim to see her alive in bed that morning, but he passed away, so we can't even definitively say whether he's someone whose information we can trust. Plus, Jeff was the person who said that he forgave Brittany for that one-night stand. And how do we actually know that he forgave her and isn't just saying that? Also, let it be known that Jeff hasn't joined in on the efforts to get her justice at all. And you would think he would care about that, right? Well, it's been almost 20 years since her murder, and not once has this loser participated in any kind of effort to help get them answers. He can't even take a moment to post about it online, and he's made a few weird comments on social media, but nothing that would indicate that he's interested in getting her justice. And you guys know that when it comes to speculation in cases, it's really something I try to stay away from. But when I get to work with families directly and I hear their stories firsthand, I do think it's important to voice some of these things, especially now that the sheriff has started to wonder if more than one person was responsible. Because in my mind, it could totally make sense. And I think one thing's for sure, and I'm sure most of you agree with me, if not all of you, I think it's naive to believe that some random person did this, that they just happened to stumble into Jeff's bedroom and just happened to find Brittany there and she just happened to be alone and that they showered. I mean, coincidences like that are just too rare.
I am usually pretty torn on who I think did it. I'll go back and forth between Chad possibly Jeff, possibly someone that we don't even know, or some other names. I don't have anything solid that has convinced me that it's one person or another, which is very confusing because some days I'll feel very strongly about one person and then I'll think about things and that might change. So I still am trying to keep an open mind on who it could possibly be. I don't think, aside from a couple people, there hasn't been many people who have been completely cleared, which I know is something that has come up specifically with Jeff. He has not been completely cleared of anything. It feels like, I mean, it's been torture for me. That's really the only way I can explain it. I was 16 when it happened, and I'm now almost 35, so I've, lived over half my life with this. Less time that I had with her, and more time without her. And with how the case has progressed up to this point, there's been so many, hills and valleys. It's been, we had the arrest, and then it failed, and then, so it's, when I talk about it, especially with my family, it's gotten worse over the years, and it's a situation that you don't really think could get worse. And I try to be here and stay here because I can't live without hopefully seeing some kind of accountability, whether that's for whoever killed her, or even from law enforcement or the DA's office, and some kind of acknowledgement that we have been failed significantly, and mostly by the people that you think are supposed to help you in these situations. It's completely changed how I view the world and people and how I perceive things. I'm aware of it and how it's different from people around me that I interact with that have not experienced something like this. Brittany and I were very, very close, and she was who I would consider my best friend, and I know she felt the same. And to have, that one person that in my life that I've had that, I could truly count on, losing that has made me feel, has made my life and my world very empty.
And now comes the most incredibly important part of the episode, which is where you guys come in, and you guys always come in so strong for these families. I cannot thank you enough. I'm so proud of this platform and my audience that you take the extra time to be an active true crime consumer, and I have some ways today that you can help. It's just astonishing to me to hear how the DA has failed this family and how Brittany still doesn't have justice. And at the end of the day, Hope and Patricia want to make sure that people don't forget who Brittany was. Hope has now lived more years without her sister than with her, and that is a pain that she carries with her every single day. I mean, their whole family does. Remembering and honoring Brittany has always been incredibly important to them, hence the several rallies for justice that they've held in her honor over the years. And they did the first one on the 15th anniversary of her murder, and they held that one outside the sheriff's office, and then the next two they decided to hold outside of the courthouse. And it probably won't surprise you at this point to hear that they were met with a ton of questioning and opposition for doing so. There was even this bullshit policy that got made about gatherings outside the courthouse with all these rules they had to follow right before they were going to do it. It was super arbitrary stuff like don't litter and don't block cars, obvious crap, which doesn't prevent them from gathering, but it's also what's the point of that? As Hope said, it seems like they just wanted to make a policy for the sake of having a policy, and it seems like they just wanted to find any reason to make it clear that they were being watched. So at the end of the day, it's not an option for Brittany to be forgotten. And right now, DA Angela Albers has made them feel like she just wants to move on from all of this. But guys, we cannot let her do that. So we have worked with Hope to come up with a couple of ways that you guys can get involved and help. And they're things that are easy to do. Okay. So I'd really appreciate if you would take the extra time. And I know so many of you will, but for starters, we decided to create an email campaign, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with by now. We've done many of these on this show over the years. So again, easy to do. I'll already have it typed up for you in the show notes of the episode. But at this point, we really just want to drive home that Brittany will not be forgotten, that we are watching to make sure that something is done about this and that we're not going away. And of course, if you want to change the email or write your own, that's fine. We just really ask that you do not get aggressive with it. What's the saying? You catch more bees with honey than vinegar or something like that. I think that's very true. And we've learned over the years that the nicer we can be, the better. Although I won't be shocked if they end up just turning off the email system. We've had campaigns where we have seen that happen, and it's very, very frustrating. And since they love to block, I guess they can't block us off or block us all, but maybe they'll just shut down the system. So that could happen. I want to give you a heads up for that. But yeah, in these cases, if they feel like no one is pushing them for answers, it's a lot easier for them to sweep this under the rug, especially because they have for so long. So we worked together to craft an email to send to Angela's office, making it explicitly clear that this is not going to go away. Now, another thing that you guys can really do to help is take your pleas public. And that would mean, in addition to privately emailing the DA's office, they need public pressure. And so, as I mentioned, they blocked Hope on Facebook, but I'm going to put their page below. And if you guys can go and please let them know, nicely-ish, that we're here and we're not giving up. And that'll also be a huge help to their family. And it can be as simple as typing out #justice for Brittany McGlone if you want to keep it pretty simple, but obviously that packs a punch to them since Hope was blocked for saying that. So some of you may get blocked for saying that alone, but whatever. But I'll also have something typed up in the show notes that you can easily copy and paste. So it's as simple as possible for you to do. You can also craft your own. Again, please be nice-ish. Okay. Let's keep it professional. What's the word I'm looking for? Serious with a mission, but kind. Maybe not kind, but not unkind. You guys know what I mean. But we're hoping that if their page is flooded with messages from all of you, that's not something that they can ignore and that they can't keep up with blocking all of you. Also, Hope says that they're working to make sure that Angela doesn't get reelected in 2026. So this is definitely more of a niche ask, but I did want to say if you happen to live in Wood County, please consider doing your research before voting and vote with an informed decision. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I also wanted to mention something really inspiring that Hope did, which was to create a scholarship in Brittany's honor. Now, this scholarship is designed to help kids who have experienced crime and also who, like Brittany, have taken an interest in some form of art or music. Music was really important to her, and it's something that the two sisters shared deeply, so she's really hoping to keep this scholarship going to give back.
I think the biggest way that people can help is to follow the Facebook page. I usually post updates if there ever is any, and share for people to share that, get the word out about our case and what's going on with the DA's office. If you're local to Wood County and have information, to reach out either to the page or law enforcement or Crime Stoppers. There's also a reward through Crime Stoppers in Wood County. So those are the main ways to help us out.
So if you've been watching or listening to this show for a while, you know how often we cover cases like this where it feels like justice is just within reach, right around the corner, but it hasn't been achieved for one reason or another, normally because of some bullshit. And this case is exactly that. And I think we can all agree that it's known who is likely responsible for Brittany's murder, but of course, knowing isn't enough. And her family shouldn't have to wait another 20 years before they have a conviction. The person or people responsible are getting to live their life or lives freely. And that's not an opportunity that Brittany was afforded. Now, Sheriff Cole has vowed to continue working on this case, and I'm really grateful for that. But whatever this disconnect is between Sheriff's office and the DA's office just needs to come to an end. It's ridiculous, it's unprofessional, and it's not fair for anyone involved. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I am really grateful to say that we have been able to afford their family a Hope grant, which I also love that Hope is named Hope and that they're going to get the Hope grant. That was just kind of cool. Now, we're still discussing our options about where we want to put that money. There are a few ideas in progress. We don't want to rush. We want to make the best decision possible. And I'll be sure to update you guys in the show notes or in a pinned comment once we get that all figured out. Or you can follow the Higher Hope Foundation on Instagram or go to our website, which is higherhope.org. And our Instagram is higherhope.org, where we post everything that we do if you're interested in learning more about what my foundation does. I also just wanted to say, if you are at all interested in getting involved with Higher Hope and what we're doing and believe in our mission, we would love to get some more financial support. I know not everyone is in the position to do that, but every dollar helps. And there's information on how to donate on our website, which will be linked below, and it would really mean the world to me. We have some big goals for the rest of this year, and I would love to have as much support as possible to help us get there. Now, currently, Crime Stoppers is offering a $5,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of Brittany's killer. So if you have any information regarding the murder of Brittany McGlone, please contact the Wood County Sheriff's Office at 903-760-1008. But that is going to be it for me today, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me and for listening to Hope and hearing Brittany's story. They desperately need the support, and you guys are always so awesome with families that come on the show. I used to always say, like, please be nice, please leave nice comments. And I never even say that anymore because I know you guys are going to just be fantastic and show them so much love and support. And, you know, I wouldn't bring people who have been through what these families have onto this show, onto a huge platform like this, if I didn't really, really trust or believe in my audience, you know, the majority of you, the vast majority of you. So I'm very, very grateful. And huge thanks to Hope and also Patricia, who helped us put everything together for this episode. We wish you guys nothing but the best, and we will always be here if you need any help. And I'm excited to see where things go and also to figure out what we're going to do with your Hope grant, because I don't know, we have some cool ideas. So I'm interested to see what we will end up doing. But that is going to be it for me this week, you guys. I will, of course, be back next week to discuss another case. And until then, stay safe out there.